Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Downtown Aviation and Redevelopment Subcommittee. My name is Daniel Valenzuela. I'm Phoenix Vice Mayor. I'm honored to be the council member for District 5. I'm joined on this subcommittee by Councilwoman Thelda Williams from District 1, Councilman Bill Gates from District 3, and Councilwoman Kate Gallego from District 8. The first item on the agenda, we are doing that now, calling the meeting to order. The second item is the call to the public. We begin every Downtown Aviation Redevelopment Subcommittee, and we end every meeting with a call to the public. It's more than symbolic, but it is a reminder that the public has the first and the last word. As you know, for any of these agenda items, you're free to fill out a card and speak on any one of these particular items. Do we have any cards for the... Oh, we do have one card for the beginning here. Ms. Ginger Maddox. And every speaker will be given 2 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Maddox.
Dar City Council people, I would like to talk about the privatization of the FAA. In January, I heard of this concept, talked to some experts in Washington, D.C. that I thought should know about it. They didn't seem to know anything. In March, the Washington Post put an article in the paper regarding the privatization. It would leave safety to the FAA, but everything else would become a nonprofit private organization, which means that they would be doing the maintenance, the building, the hiring, the firing. So since we were all caught pretty flat-footed on NextGen, I'd just like to bring it to everyone's consciousness that this could be a possibility because the FAA or the Congress has said that they have become quite dissatisfied with the way the FAA is handling NextGen. So I think this puts this in a new light. And last Friday, NPR dedicated an entire program to this issue. So I just wanted to bring it to your consciousness, and let's not get caught flat-footed this time.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Item 4 is for information and discussion. This is for the FAA changes in aircraft departure procedures update. I'm sorry, let me back up. You're welcome to join us. You're welcome to join us. I did skip an item. Thank you, Councilwoman. Item 3, approval of the April 1st, 2015 minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Now we are at item 4. Now this item has been added to this particular
Actually, I
subcommittee.
apologize. I was present at the subcommittee meeting, and the minute says subcommittee meeting is present, so if we could.
Yeah,
There are
we can
many
amend-
comments from
we-
me in the minutes,
we
but
can-
but at the top it says I wasn't there.
Yeah,
Doesn't need a
So clear-
motion to, thank you.
okay. Thank you, Councilwoman. This particular item has been added to, it's a standing item on this particular subcommittee for the past several months, since the beginning of the, I'll call it the FAA issues. And I do want to thank our city staff for continuing to be here, giving us the update that is needed. It also gives our community leaders a regularly scheduled time to come out and also be heard and share your thoughts as well. So that said, we have Tammy Fisher and Chad Makowski here. Welcome.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I will very shortly hand the presentation over to Assistant Aviation Director Chad Makowski, but I did want to reinforce we're here with our monthly update on the flight path issue with the FAA, and I just want to reinforce, as I always do, that we continue to spend quite a bit of time and apply extensive resources to this problem, and working hard for a quick resolution of the problem as fast as we can. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Makowski.
Thank you, Tammy. There we go. Okay. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, Chad Makowski, pleased to be here. Just wanted to start with a quick recap of, it's been a while since we've been together. I wanted to give you a quick recap of some of the activity that's occurred since the last subcommittee meeting that we've had. In terms of total noise complaints from September 18th through May of this year, we are seeing just under 10,000 noise complaints, a little over 9,600 noise complaints, from a total of 1,253 unique households throughout the city of Phoenix. As you can see by the graphic, the concentration is more dispersed than it was initially, but you do see certainly some areas of significant concentration continuing in the historic communities along Grand Avenue, as well as in the Southwest Valley in South Phoenix and Laveen. It's important to note that since calendar year 2013, this has been a significant increase. In 2013, we had 221 noise complaints in all of that year for Phoenix Sky Harbor. Moving on to this slide, this is just a sense of the Grand Avenue corridor just before it reaches the first waypoint, which we call Townsend. And that's at Bethany Home and Grand Avenue is where the Townsend waypoint is. As you can see here, there are significant variances in flight tracks. In fact, we are now very closely tracking what we call early turns. So you've heard of that term before. The FAA late last year indicated that they would, unless there were reasons for safety, they would minimize to the extent possible the number of early turns over communities. As you can see, since January, based on our tracking, we are continuing to see a number of early turns. As of the March noise report, which is published on our website and available to the public, they can see for themselves the summary of the early turns that we're observing, and we are forwarding that to the FAA for evaluation every month as we calculate these numbers. It is important to note, though, that as you get closer to that Townsend waypoint at Bethany Home and Grand Avenue, that this is what the FAA considers to be a fly-by fix, not a fly-through fix. And what's unique about that is it means that based on that methodology, some of those turns that are occurring before the fix are completely legitimate because they, instead of flying through the fix, they are flying by it to get to their next waypoint. But we have a way to characterize what is reasonable based on that methodology and what is not reasonable, and we are tracking that closely. Very proud and pleased to announce that on April 30th of this year, the staff at Sky Harbor worked very, very closely with a third-party vendor to produce a solution that further provides transparency to the community members and other stakeholders who are interested in flight tracks. And thank you. And we produced a tool that's really a flight tracking tool that allows the community to see in near real time what is happening with the flight tracks over the various communities here around Sky Harbor Airport. There is a 10-minute security delay that is required by the Federal Aviation Administrator that needs to be imposed. However, what is really important is that the community, in addition to the near real-time viewing of this information, can at any point go back in history and replay events, and that allows them to see what's happened. A great example of this is last Friday, we had a pretty significant storm come through the valley Friday evening, and that resulted in the FAA needing to radar vector aircraft, and they did a number of early turns where they almost immediately turned aircraft to the northwest after departing Sky Harbor. So they were not flying on course as they typically would because they needed to do that. They indicate for safety concerns related to the storm cells that were in the community. Well, we were able to the very next day go back and do a complete analysis just using this very simple tool from about 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. that night and see exactly how many planes and how that looked. And so that's a really useful tool, I think, for the community. Another interesting thing with this, before I continue, I would just add that on as of May 18th of this year, this tool also allows the community to submit noise complaints right through the web-based tool here. So they can say, that's the plane I want to complain about. They can actually submit a complaint right through that. That is something new that is available to the community. And since April 30th through May 18th, we've had 1,488 noise complaints submitted through this new portal. So in terms of key support, we continue to receive strong support from Congressman Gallego on this issue. And April 2nd of this year, he and a joint delegation of the Arizona Congressional Delegation really submitted a strongly worded letter to indicate their support for the community and the focus on the fact that we need to do more, the FAA needs to do more to resolve this issue for the community. The congressman is also a member of the Congressional Quiet Skies Caucus, and so he's advocating for reform in Washington and how the methodology the FAA uses to determine what constitutes real noise for the community. And so we applaud his efforts there. In addition to Congressman Gallego and the members of the congressional delegation, I'm pleased to announce that letters from both Senators McCain and Flake have been issued to the administrator. They are all available on our website for the community to review. But we really do see some activity in Washington from our congressional delegation on this issue, and we thank them for their support there. And then lastly, on April 16th of this year, we had a special policy meeting, City Council policy meeting. And we got some direction that was useful, and as a result of that, City Manager Ed Zerker issued a letter on April 16th, shortly after, he issued a letter to the administrator of the FAA to request that the FAA do a number of things. One is to bring the PBN working group as it was to a close based on the disappointing results of that working group. The second was to create another forum free from the constraints that were imposed on the PBM working group for us to really get some work done and resolve this issue for our community. The third was to seriously consider the city proposed alternatives. We don't believe the FAA gave our alternatives the opportunity that they deserved. And then fourth, to commit that the EA, commit to doing an EA to further study the effects of the September 18th implementation, because we think there were some issues with the environmental process that were flawed. So on to Metroplex. This is something that is ongoing now, and I think we had talked briefly about this in the last session that we had with you. This is the redesign of airspace in the area depicted by the red line on this graphic. It goes as far north and west as Prescott, as far south as Tucson, and any airport in between has the potential to be impacted by the Metroplex process and the community surrounding those airports. Essentially, the areas of interest of the FAA, they're going to do major reform all the way up to 30,000 feet, but they want significant feedback about changes that could be made below 10,000 feet in altitude, because they recognize that that's an area that the community could be most sensitive to changes in aircraft routes and altitudes. And so they had issued a comment period that was for 30 days and was due to expire on April 27th. However, on April 23rd, 9 airport directors, including Sky Harbor, Tucson, and a number of others in the Valley, submitted a joint letter to the FAA requesting an extension, and they did give us an extension through May 15th, so that date is now expired. And we also obviously asked that the FAA do formal public scoping sessions. We think that that's important so the public has an opportunity to provide feedback before they do the route design. And we ask that they provide airports and communities with a seat at the table in this process as a part of that request. In terms of notifications, we recognize this is really an important issue for communities and other affected agencies. We want to give them an opportunity to comment. So the city council offices, and thank you all for your support on this, helped us by sending notices out to your constituents on your listservs and in your newsletters. That helped to really inform a broad-ranging constituency of this Metroplex process, what it is and why it's important to comment. We also issued letters to several listservs, including our airport email, noise email listservs, the Historic Preservation Office's listserv, and neighborhood services. In addition to that, we posted this widely on social media to include Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. We engaged our fellow departments here within the city, our Parks Department, our Water Department, as well as at the county and state with Maricopa County Parks, the Arizona State Parks, and the tourism community as well. The idea here is that we want to make sure that people know about this and that if they have an interest in this issue, that they have that opportunity to comment with the FAA. Final thoughts on Metroplex is that since the time that these letters were sent, the FAA extended, in addition to extending the comment period to May 15th, the FAA on May 8th sent us an email indicating that they would not do any additional scoping. They did not formally say they would not do scoping, but they felt the level of outreach to the community that they had proposed once the draft EA was published would be sufficient. And so we are concerned with that, and we're going to respond and suggest that they do more interaction with the community earlier than they are currently suggesting they will. They expect to publish the draft EA sometime, or environmental assessment sometime in mid-2016. So we have from now to then to work with them to hopefully get a little bit more of a collaborative approach to engaging our community in this issue. And as of this date, they are still silent on the airport's request to participate in the design process. And so we intend to continue to request that we be allowed to participate in this process. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Ms. Fisher to talk a little bit about the 6-point plan that the City Council approved and our progress on those points today.
Thank you, Chad. Well, included in large part in your city council packet today is a pretty detailed summary of the work that we've been doing on this 6-point plan since the council gave us that direction on April 16th. We will continue to provide updates both to the city manager's office and the mayor and council. This memo that I prepared for the city manager is also posted on our skyharbor.com website /flight paths. And I'm proud to say that this week we launched a listserv so that as people go on to the skyharbor.com /flight paths page, on every page of that section, there is a note at the top that says subscribe to updates. So as things happen, as new letters get posted, as new information unfolds, we'll be able to push out information to those who are tracking this issue so that they can get the latest information as quickly as possible. So I think that was a huge accomplishment, and I appreciate the help of the city's Information Technology Services Department as well as our public relations team to make that happen. I think that will be very helpful to the community as well. So that is the biggest accomplishment, I think, under the community engagement. We continue to study ways to organize the community, and we'll be working with the council on recommendations for how to organize the community in a more formal way so that we can work together on this issue moving forward. As far as the airline collaboration with the airlines, we have made presentations to several airline industry groups that we regularly meet with, corporate properties people, local managers, as well as I made a presentation at the Arizona Airports Association meeting along with a representative from American Airlines to make sure that our airport community and our stakeholders, airport users, are aware of this issue for Sky Harbor and the Phoenix community. We continue to talk to other airports and coalesce around this issue to learn from one another and to help each other avoid similar issues in the future. And our Washington representative has been hard at work looking at language that can be introduced, working with key legislative committees on language that can be introduced into the reauthorization bill, and also gathering support from elected officials of other cities on this topic. And then Chad gave a pretty detailed review of the Metroplex process. We did immediately convene a number of Arizona airports to talk about this issue and to gather their support for requesting the public scoping. And so I'm very pleased that 9 airport directors in the state, including the 3 largest airports, did co-sign a letter to the FAA asking for the extension as well as the public scoping and supporting the request to be included in the design process. We'll continue to work with our airport partners here in Arizona as well as throughout the nation on this topic. And then Chad also mentioned the public view was an important advancement in the evolution of our noise program at Sky Harbor. We are, with the approval of the fiscal year 16 budget, we will have new positions in the airport noise office. We are already working on recruitments for that, subject to approval in next year's budget, and we'll be prepared to get those folks with additional airspace expertise as well as manpower to manage the situation from the noise office. We'll be ready to get those team members added as quickly as possible. And so we will continue to provide updates to you on this 6-point plan. Seems to be working very well. And we'll keep you posted as we move forward. That concludes our presentation, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I do have some cards. Like, everyone okay if I go to the cards? All right, first card is Brent Kleinman.
First off, I have to apologize for my dress. We're redoing the floors in our house, so I
All right.
forgot to pull a suit out of the closet before they started. But my question is in regards to the FAA response that we have been expecting and are still waiting for on the letters sent by the city manager and by Chad as well in April. There was a mail in that went out, I believe, May 8th that stated we were waiting. It's now May 20th. Is that coming sometime in the foreseeable future? Do we have an update on when that response is going to be provided to us? Depending on that response, where are our next steps that you may or may not be able to share, depending on, the executive session requirements? But the communities feel that they are being left out again. A lot of what's coming up, flight tracking is neat, complaining online, great. But we need to know where we're going with this, what the next steps are. Do the residents need to take a more active role in doing things outside the city's purview, or can we have faith in the city taking these next steps that are necessary? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do you mind
Councilwoman
if I-
Gallego? Yes, sure.
Wonderful. With Mayor Stanton's leadership, we've been very aggressively reaching out to the federal government. He's spoken regularly with the White House and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, which is our liaison as local government officials, and I had a chance for a face-to-face conversation with the head of that office on Thursday. And then the mayor convened a meeting with the council members who are closest to the airport, with the FAA and high-level executives from the airports, which was very helpful because often when we talk to one stakeholder, they speak to the constraints placed on them by another stakeholder. And so I think it's important that we all get in the same room and say, are we committed? You are partners. Will you help us do something to that? And they did agree to a more high-level discussion, and maybe I could turn it to Paul Blue for a little bit more.
Sure. Vice Mayor, Councilman Gallego. So this occurred yesterday, and so the focus is to try and get together yet this month and see if there is opportunities for solutions to the noise concerns. And so we're working at scheduling that meeting. And so it is indeed was executives from FAA headquarters, from our major carriers. And so to Mr. Kleinman's question, we indeed are attempting to advance the ball. And while there are not every topic, I think, as you alluded to, we can precisely discuss, I think we are very cognizant of the community's interest and need for us to keep moving forward, and we are. And are focused on, at the community's request, action. And so that would be my comment.
Okay. Opal Wagner?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, my name is Opal Wagner, and I live in Central Phoenix in one of the historic districts affected by the aircraft noise. And I came today to talk about, or what prompted me to come, because I've been to many, many meetings over the past 8 months, and I've spoken at a few of them. And today I was prompted to come because there was a proposal by the airport staff that was continued by the city council at their last meeting, but there was actually a proposal put forth, and I understand it was unanimously recommended for approval by this subcommittee and it was a scheme to basically pay the airlines to put to add new routes or new flights or additional routes for existing routes, and basically would pay a carrier up to $1.5 million to open a new route and basically put more planes over those of us who are suffering. All those little dots on the map up there that Chad showed, that's us, that's people. So I think it sends a very mixed message. I think it sends a huge disconnect that the city, do you stand with this community or not? One of my neighbors said it when she read that proposal, it felt like being punched in the gut. Is the city stand with us in trying to stop these flights over our homes, or are you sending a mixed message to the airline that, hey, by the way, we're gonna pay you guys up to $1.5 million if you'll fly more planes over our citizens? And I realize the city has a vested interest in growing the airport, and so did all of we until this flight path changed. But I just ask that the council look at every proposal that comes out of the aviation department should now be looked at through the lens of how it's affecting us dots on the map, And if it's going to create more, destroy quality of life even more, please, I just urge you to not vote on that and put a hold on expanding airport operations until this is fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Ms. Nicole Marquez.
How you guys doing today? Thank you, Opal. That was awesome. I just have a few points I want to bring up. So FAA gratitude working with us. I'm not gratified in any measure. Marketing on the backs of residents, great idea. As far as item 108, bad idea for the residents. Sent a very strong message to the rest of us that are sitting here on a daily basis on a 24/7, actually having those jets ram over the top of our houses. I don't know why there was not more outreach toward some of the avionics companies that actually develop things here in the state of Arizona, and actually saying to them, hey, will you stand with our residents as well? Because I think they'll have a little bit of sway, seeing as that they have sway with the airlines that actually implement their technology into their planes. The next thing is proud moments. I'm glad that the aviation staff is very proud of themselves. However, I'm not. I went through tons of documents yesterday, over 14 binders that are sitting up on floor 15 of the city building here. And I think people really need to know that. It's been since February of this year that's actually been sitting up there and no one's known about it. So I'm not very proud of that. Helpful, that's not helpful either, not knowing what information is out there to qualify what we've actually been going through. And the learning is great. I mean, we certainly don't want this to happen to other cities, but we certainly don't want this to continue to happen to us. So this is a really big deal. The 6 points are great. I'm really glad to see that a lot of that was implemented and discussed per some conversations. So please keep us in mind. We're not just dots. We really are struggling every day. Multiple people, even on Mother's Day, showed up to my house asking what to do. Should they sell their house? Should they leave? Now, as the redevelopment of downtown, you guys should be seriously concerned about this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Marquez. I have 3 other cards. Pamela Niesel, and you're able to speak if you'd like. I mean, would you like to?
Members of the subcommittee, I've never come to anything like this. I've never had the need to. I moved into Levine 9 years ago. Actually, I paid a lot of money for my little house because it was the wrong time to buy. And I moved there because it's quiet and rural, and now it's a nightmare living there. Planes constantly. I can't open my windows. I love gardening. I can't do gardening outside. It got headaches constantly. Can't hear the television. I can't open the windows, so therefore the air conditioning's on all the time, so that's gone up. I do know about the website with the tracking of the flight pass, but I don't need to know about where the planes are going. I know that's all important to you, but it's not important to us. What's important, we can hear it. I can hear 6 planes going over my house in a 20-minute period. I don't need a flight tracker to tell me that. I also, I'm sorry, I'm just really nervous. The emailing, the complaint system, I mean, you can see how many people are complaining, and I'm on Nextdoor, and I'm on the Let's Make Noise and all of that, but there's so many times where if you read on Nextdoor, you're finding that people can't even get through with their complaints, and I don't know if it's because there's so many complaints that it's backed up, but people are not even getting through with half the complaints. And I had to almost laugh because there's like a date, like what day and time did the plane go over? I can go for a week and just check every 24 hours a day for a week, night and day, planes constantly. So I just wanted to make some of those points, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for coming out, Ms. Niesel. Robert Bettner.
I agree with everything everybody else has said. I live in the Willow Historic District, so I got full exposure to the route change last Friday night. I happened to go to a restaurant called Oven and Vine in our neighborhood. About 10 neighbors went. They had all the windows open with the rain. The weather was so cool. The planes were coming over so loud. We're in a restaurant, packed, music, noise. We could hardly hear each other over planes just rumbling along. They're right at First Avenue. I mean, how many feet are they from like 30-story buildings? And this is considered safe? I get back to my house. I mean, it's plane after plane just flying right over. I couldn't take it anymore at the restaurant because it was so loud. Because I sit in my house every day with the windows shut, fans on in every room, air purifiers, the hood on in the kitchen. I had the bathroom fans on all day. The air conditioning's been on since March, even though we're having the best spring ever. So whatever the airlines are saving, we're paying for in our utility bills and our quality of life, and we're just sick of it.
Thank you, Mr. Bednar. Pauline Arriaga?
I'll just echo what everyone else is saying and just try to really impress upon you all how truly frustrated the citizens are. I really don't know if you all grasp where we are at this point. I live in the Encanto Manor Historic District. I've lived there since 2002. It's the first home I've purchased. It's the home I intended to stay in. I've never seen so many for sale signs just on my street alone. People who have lived in these neighborhoods for decades want to leave at this point. We don't know whether to continue investing money into refurbishing our homes, into rehabilitating these neighborhoods. We're really done here. And these updates are lovely, but they're updates. They're very procedural. You know, it's very frustrating for us to hear things such as, oh, we're going to hire more noise complaint officers to supposedly give us calls back. We don't want folks calling us back. We want some actual action here. And letter writing, that's terrific. But we've seen what's happening with the FAA. We've seen the responses, or frankly, the non-responses. We need you all to respond on our behalf, or we're going to find a way to do it.
Thank you, Ms. Arriaga. Last card, Ms. Ginger Maddox.
Subcommittee members, I'd like to make a comment on the fact that you recommended the marketing program to the City Council. I think one of the things that you haven't considered is the type of aircraft that international flights bring to our airport. They are a different type of equipment than for domestic travel. One of the noisiest aircraft that flies into Sky Harbor is British Airways. We are going to have a lot more of that type of aircraft fly on our flight paths. So if they're going to continue in the same route that they have now, if we think we've got a noise problem today and you bring in this international traffic, it's going to get even greater. So I would ask that you change your recommendation to say, yes, we want a good marketing program because it does bring in necessary revenue. But please, let's fix the problem that we have now, because it's only going to get worse if we do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Okay, that's it for the cards. I'll open it up to my colleagues in the council. Any questions or comments? Okay. All right. Well, that is it for this particular item. Thank you so much to our community leaders who've come out, and of course to our city staff for updating us once again. And I want to thank all of our federal delegation for continuing to press the FAA every single day. Thank you. Okay. Moving on now to item 5. Downtown Phoenix, Inc.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Economic Development staff is here today to talk to you about how we deliver services related to the existing Enhanced Municipal Services District that has been in place for about 2 decades. And there has been a little bit of reorganization within the downtown community. You're familiar with Downtown Phoenix, Inc. being a new umbrella organization. And so Christine is here today to share with you The annual contract, which we bring to you each year for services that are paid for by property owners within a 90-block area. And the addition this year is there'll be a little bit of a different organization for how we contract, but this will be consistent as you have heard in past years. So Christine?
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. We're here today to talk to you about the renewal of a contract for Downtown Phoenix, Inc. You'll think it's a little early. We were just with you in December talking about the contract for the next annual contract, but wanted to come back to you a little early this year due to some structural changes within the organization. In the interest of full transparency and the ability to move forward and negotiate and get things where we need to bring it back again, to bring our EMSD back again in December, we wanted to present to you today our reasons for a recommendation to go ahead and enter into our contract with DPI early. I don't know if you know my colleague, Wasna Sayasen, who is in our Community and Economic Development Department, and she'll give us an overview on the EMSD and what we're asking for today. Wasna?
As Chris Mackey has said, that this is for a contract award to DPI for the implementation of the Enhanced Municipal Services District. This contract will be for the duration of 5 years from calendar years 2016 to 2020. And I also want to introduce Mr. Dave Kreider and Mr. David Broderick. They're in the audience as well as representatives of DPI and DPP. The current contract with the EMSC that the city has right now is set to expire at the end of this year, and in order to allow DPI sufficient time to work on their draft plan and budget for 2016, we're here to present the request. Just some quick background information in regards to the Enhanced Municipal Services District. For the district itself has been in existence for 25 years now. So in 1990, City Council authorized the establishment of the district to provide for enhanced services within that orange boundary that you see. It covers 90 square blocks of downtown. It goes from Fillmore to Jackson Street, 7th Street to 3rd Avenue. The enhanced services that are provided to the property owners are paid through a special assessment that is levied on their property taxes. The enhanced services fall within these 6 main categories. Examples of the enhanced services that you likely see downtown are the Orange Ambassadors, where they're greeting and directing visitors to where they need to go. DPI did a large revamp of their website, dtphx.org, to help market downtown Phoenix as a unique destination for visitors to come visit. And then also DPP and DPI staff were integral to the coordination and planning of Super Bowl Central for us. Their network of property owners, business owners, tenants, and residents really helped us in our communication to make sure that Super Bowl Central was a success. As Chris had mentioned, and Paul, there was an organizational restructuring with DPI and DPP in January of this year, where DPI became the official umbrella organization over DPP, in addition to Downtown Phoenix CDC and the Phoenix Community Alliance. Due to this restructuring is hence why we're wanting to contract directly with DPI. The contract itself is a 5-year renewal, so in 5 years we'll be getting this request again, but the recommendation is to contract with DPI due to the restructuring, and then it also helps from the city staff side in regards to contract administration with this one vendor. The EMSD contract award to DPI was discussed at the April DPP board meeting. The board members didn't have any concerns or questions expressed, and Mr. Kreider and Mr. Roderick did lend themselves to answer any questions directly with them as well. The board will remain the same in regards to representing the EMSD payment or payees of the district. The DPI revenues, expenses, and accounting are going to remain separate from the EMSD itself, so the DPP expenses will remain separate from DPI. The mayor and city council, yourselves, will continue to have oversight over the annual work plan and budget, so you will still see us coming to you every year at the end of the year to grant approval for the final work plan and budget. This table outlines the EMSD budget approval process. So during the summer is when DPP works on drafting their work plan and budget. And then also DPI and city staff work on updating any property use and data. In October, this subcommittee will approve a tentative budget for 2016. And then in December, the full city council will will approve the final work plan, budget, and pay ordinance. And in early 2016 is when the property owners will receive their assessment billings. And at this time, we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have a couple of cards here. We have one card. In favor, Kathleen Santon? Did I say that right? Oh, okay. Thank you. Marked in favor. Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the council or on the subcommittee. Any questions? Councilwoman Gallego?
I serve on the Downtown Phoenix Partnership, and I'm glad that we remain committed to outreach and partnership with our downtown stakeholders and the people who support this financially, and making sure that we continue to get feedback and work proactively with them to create a stronger downtown and have more wins like the Super Bowl. So I will be supporting the motion.
Great. Councilwoman Williams?
I have known these organizations for a long time, and they have done much for the city of Phoenix and developing and having the downtown continue to prosper and grow. I am very supportive, and I would move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comments? Okay. A strong downtown is a great indicator of a strong city. I think this relationship is part of the reason we have such a strong downtown. I tell personal friends and family members, in fact, I tell constituents in Central and West Phoenix all the time, if you haven't been to downtown in the last 3 years, you haven't seen downtown. And it's just it's a great place to be. And it's because of these types of partnerships. So Mr. Kreider, thank you for your leadership. And I mean, that can go on. Think of the many years he was committed to downtown as a city employee as well. Of course, Mr. Roderick is here also. Thank you for your leadership. And so we have a motion and a second. I am also in full support. That said, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on now to item 6, Parking Management Services Contract Award Recommendation for the City of Phoenix Convention Center.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Convention Center staff is here today to recommend to you approval for a new parking management contract. As Mr. Chan will describe, the Convention Center is responsible for the administration of a number of parking garages on the east side of downtown in and around their facility. And staff has gone through a process to procure a new vendor at the expiration of an existing contract. With that, Mr. Chan.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, first of all, let me introduce at the table with me Kathy Wanger, who oversees our business services division and is responsible for all of the department's procurement processes, and then Bob Fingerman, who is oversees our day-to-day parking management of our convention center managed parking garages. We recently went through a competitive request for proposal process to secure a new parking services contract. The panel recommended Ace Parking, who also happens to be the incumbent. But with that, I'm going to let Kathy and Bob walk through the process and the panel recommendation.
Thank you, John. Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the subcommittee. So just to refresh your memory, we were here last winter where you gave us approval to issue the RFP, which we subsequently received approval from full council to do that. As Paul alluded to, this is a number of garages. 3 are part of the Convention Center fund and 2 are general fund garages that we operate that are very proximate to our facility. So this would be for all 5 of these garages. It also includes valet services, which we offer to our events in the facilities should they need that sort of service for their particular events. We did extensive outreach for this RFP this year. In addition to normal outreach we do in periodicals and newspapers and that sort of thing, there were 2 industry associations that we reached out to, Parking Today and the International Parking Institute websites, so 2 websites. We also did extensive searching online, contacting 19 parking organizations to notify them them of this RFP and our need for a new contract for parking management services. So we had a lot of interest. We had a mandatory pre-proposal, up to which 7 firms attended. And we did receive 5 proposals in early February for this. This is a 2-phase process. It's a technical evaluation is the first part of that, and based on the panel's recommendation at the end of that technical evaluation, firms will be invited back for interviews. So all 5 firms went through the technical evaluation. 3 firms were invited back for interviews, and as a result of that process, Ace Parking was recommended to award the contract. The panel had specific reasons why they recommended Ace Parking. They were very pleased with their customer service and hospitality standards. We are in the customer service business, hospitality business. That's very important for our patrons to have a good experience when they come into the garages. That's the first time they see us and the last time they see us when they come to the convention center. Ace has extensive experience in what we call the revenue control system. That's the gate arms, the ticket spitters, everything that keeps track of all the money. So they are well versed in our system that we use now and other systems should at some point we change out that system. They have a strong local presence, and the panel felt that was important because there is turnover in this industry in terms of employees, and so having a good skilled workforce available to operate the facility depending on it's a quiet day downtown or it's a very, very busy day downtown like we had with Super Bowl or like we're going to have very shortly with Comic-Con. So a skilled workforce was very important to the panel. They also really liked Ace's expertise in the event side of the business. While we do a lot of daily parking and we have a lot of monthly parkers, we really are in the event parking business as the primary parking that we handle. And then they were pleased as well with the online parking program that is offered by Ace Parking. And I'm going to show you that in just a second, a little bit. This is kind of a small slide, but what I wanted to focus on is that one of the key components of this procurement is that the vendors offer online parking. Parking technology is changing every single day. They were, I would say that they were probably a little later to the game of technology than a lot of folks, but they really have jumped on board. So under this new contract, folks will be able to go online and buy parking before they come downtown. They can select the date, the time, the location where they want to park. And should they come downtown and it be very crowded, like it will be for a Comic-Con type event, they can actually buy parking while they're in line. There are other features to an online parking. Monthly parkers can pay their parking online, whereas right now they physically have to come to the office. So a real great innovation with this new contract that was included in the scope is online parking. I did want to mention, sorry.
We have a question. Councilman?
Just a question about that. So you actually reserve a specific spot, or how does that work?
Not exactly, Bob may.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, it guarantees a spot in the garage, but not necessarily a particular spot. There is room reserved, but not a particular spot dedicated for that patron.
Is there, but it's still like the same price everywhere within the, and is there some kind of a fee for that? Would the folks pay a fee to do it online?
Councilman Gates, currently for Comic-Con, for example, there's a $2 administration fee that Ace Parking imposes to the client or to the customer.
Okay, so you're actually doing this now. This is now available?
Right, under the current contract with Ace, they are implementing it for the first time with our Comic-Con. As with ticketing fees, clients can choose to pay that fee, so it isn't necessarily passed on to the patron, to the parker themselves. It can be individually determined.
But if I'm, I just know I'm going to come downtown, will I, as a resident, will I be able to take advantage of this?
Yes, you could purchase daily parking if you were coming down for, say you were coming down for the auto show, you would be able to do that. Whether or not you had an additional fee would be based on whether the auto show wanted to pay that or not.
Okay, I see. And is this something where we'll get some information so we can push this out to our residents to, because that's a real concern for people from my district, coming down here that sometimes they can be a little intimidated, but if they knew that, hey, I could reserve a spot in advance, it might, address some of their anxiety.
Yes, Councilman Gates. This is not only on our website, we're encouraging our clients to put it on their website. So if they're coming downtown to an event and they're researching that event online, looking to find out where it's at, what time, there will be a link to our online parking as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. The financial implications are this. It's as you can see, it's just under $1.5 million a year. That is fixed for the first 3 years of the contract. It will not go up. That is the initial term of the contract as well, 3 years. And there are 3 2-year extension options available. I did want to also let you know that we did receive one protest as a result of this, and the protester ultimately withdrew their protest.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, so you have our staff's recommendation in the staff report, but I also would point out in the audience, Mr. Brian Gansert, President of Operations for Mace Parking, and Mr. Mike DeJesus, who is the General Manager of the current Convention Center garages. They're both here in the audience and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. We do have one card. Jason Segan, marked opposed.
Good afternoon, council members and committee chair. My name's Jason Segan with Linear Parking. We were the ones who did withdraw our protest before. It was on a technicality. But I'm here to say today just to thank staff for all the hard work they've done on the RFP. We were privileged to take part in it, but we're also here to kind of take umbrage with it as well. We respectfully disagree with the staff recommendation. Linear Parking was ranked #1 in the technical evaluation. We faltered a little bit during the interview and presentation part, but that's the most subjective part of the RFP process. We feel that and are proud of our proposal. We feel we offered the best and most current technology and best practices for the city management of the parking garage. So we just wanted to go on record. We know you guys have a tough decision, but we're here just wanted to state what we felt. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Councilwoman Gallego.
So one of the things we talk about often in this committee is that we have a lot of stakeholders in the downtown parking, even within the city, multiple departments. So are continued partners committed to continuing to work with us as we try to be as seamless as possible, given that they're going to have a different payment solution for our phones than Pango is for our street meters? But wherever possible, if we can drive people towards common mappings, common systems that tell you what spots are available where, so because people outside of the city don't know what the streets department does versus the convention center.
Councilwoman Gallego, I think one of the things that challenges us is that we don't have a system yet in the garages where we can actually do counts of spaces. It's really a financial issue. So when you pull up to one of our garages, if it is full, there's a sign there that says, there's temporarily closed that it's full, because we don't have space counts. And that is something that would help, I think, someday lead us to the ability to direct people a little better. We do, though, have large garages, which helps people who come downtown. And one of the advantages to us of operating 5 garages, if one is full, we can help people find the next one that is closest to wherever they're going and still get them to where they need to be. So chances are they'll find a spot in one of our garages. It may not be where they first went, but we can redirect them and help them and get them to where they need to go.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Gallego, staff is entirely committed to the notion that where possible, the technological solutions will be as integrated as the opportunities arise between what's on the streets, what is happening in garages. And I think we have talked to this committee in the past about trying to do sharing of spaces, particularly for downtown employers, and trying to have integrated solutions. And so much like other discussions we're having elsewhere in the organization, these opportunities don't always perfectly align at the moment, but your point is spot on. The more, in both you and Councilman Gates, the more that the public understands how to use it and that there's a commonality, and so we will strive for that, recognizing we have some ways to go in that regard. But we do agree with you that that's a goal and we will pursue it.
Wonderful, thank you. So how do we take reservations if we don't know how many spots we have? We just cut it off early and...
We have a lot of information on our website, Councilwoman Gallego. The technology that Ace Parking currently has feeds into their systems and will let us know how many people have reserved online for that particular day. For example, Comic-Con is our first event where we are testing the technology. We have 230 folks that have pre-reserved space in the North Garage and 73 patrons that have pre-reserved in the East Garage. So this information is already within Ace Parking's computer software. So it reserves space offline for them. So they're aware of who's coming in and they can take those spaces offline.
Thank you.
Bob, would it be fair to say that at the booth, when it's time to pull a ticket, there's a presentation of something by the person who has prepaid for the parking, so that the parking operator would indeed know someone is entering the garage and decrement how much they're reserving?
That is correct. When you go to purchase your online parking, you print a receipt and they scan it through a QR code, and that's Ace Parking has that technology, and they've invested in that as well.
All right, any other questions or comments? Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So have we thought about using this technology at the airport as well for airport parking to be able to reserve spots in advance?
Mr. Chair, Councilman Gates, I am told by the airport staff as I look over my shoulder that this is indeed, there is an affirmative response to your question.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I guess I will entertain a motion if we have no further discussion.
Move approval of staff's recommendations.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, item 7, Greater Phoenix Convention and Visitors Bureau Marketing Agreement.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, staff is here today with representatives of Visit Phoenix, the Phoenix CVB, to discuss the convention center marketing efforts and related contract. As you know, Visit Phoenix has been our vendor for some time in providing marketing services in the out years forward for trying to fill the convention center with quality activity that brings economic life into the region and more specifically into Phoenix. And so it is time for a new contract, and staff is here today to discuss with you the details of that. John?
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're very excited to be here today. The reason we're excited is that our convention business is back, and I think it's back in a big way. 2015 is going to be a significant year in terms of business, people in the building, conventioners in the business in the building. So let me take a second before we get into the presentation to kind of give you a flavor of what's been happening at the convention center. So since January and for the rest of this year, it's essentially one group moves in, they hold their event, they move out, the next group moves in, and that's what's happening this week. Last week, over the weekend, Dish Network held their convention here in Phoenix. They moved out over the weekend. The International Symposium, Microwave Symposium moved in. We have 900 businesses that are in the exhibit hall right now showcasing the latest in radio frequency and microwave technology that Steve's going to talk a little bit more about. They move out this weekend, then Comic-Con moves in. So this is kind of a flavor of what's happening in the downtown, and we anticipate it's going to continue for the rest of this calendar year, leading up to the college football champ game in January of next year. So with me today is Steve Moore, President and CEO of Visit Phoenix, James Jesse, Senior Vice President, and Jerry Harper, our Deputy Director of Sales and Marketing at the Convention Center. I'm going to turn over to Jerry and James, and they're going to talk about the marketing plan.
Thank you, John. Mr. Vice Mayor and members of the subcommittee, What James and I would like to do today is kind of talk a little bit about what it is that we do in partnership as it pertains to the activity in the convention center that John was just referring to. We'll give a brief overview of our relationship. We'll talk about some of the positives from what's been happening over the past few years, and we'll give an overview of where we're headed as far as activity in the building over the next few years, and we'll probably talk a little bit also about some of the events that have been, maybe expand a little bit on what John was referring to earlier. So what I'd like to do is just give you a brief refresher on the relationship between the Convention Center and Visit Phoenix. The Visit Phoenix is the group that focuses on the groups that are 14 months and out. So Convention Center focuses on those groups that are short term, is what I like to refer to. These are the groups that we like to say fill in some of the holes that are left by some of the large citywide conventions. So you'll see corporate meetings, you'll see local shows, you'll see some performances because, again, we are the Phoenix Convention Center and venues. Those venues are our theaters and also the parking garages that you just had a presentation on just before. But then also we have graduations, we have banquets, receptions. Those are the types of events that I like to say are the ones that fill in some of those holes. And then James will talk a little bit about what Visit Phoenix does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Essentially, of our 14-person sales team, 7 of them are dedicated to the operations and helping Jerry and the team fill up the convention center. The balance of our staff that are based here in Phoenix and in remote offices in Chicago and Washington, D.C. actually work tirelessly every day to book business in and out every hotel in the city of Phoenix. So we balance our efforts on booking downtown and the rest of the hotels throughout the city. Our conventions focus mainly on filling up the space at the convention center and filling up the hotel rooms at the area hotels and resorts. The mega events that we bring in here, this has actually been an ongoing strategy. Most notably, the Super Bowl 3 short months ago that activated downtown Phoenix. This strategy actually started years ago with the fulfillment of the NBA All-Star Game, Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and is going to continue, to John's point, over the next couple of years when we host the National Championship football game, and then also into 2017 when we host the NCAA Final Four, of which a lot of activity will be centered in downtown Phoenix. So moving forward on a lot of big events, this has been a very exciting time for us, and I think our last presentation here, Steve highlighted that we're only one of 2 cities that ever hosted these 3 mega events in consecutive years. So we're very excited about that. Speaking of some of our key marketing strategies and marketing and sales strategies, these don't only speak to what we do in downtown Phoenix, but overall, again, what we do for all area hotels and resorts. This See It to Believe It program right here, we've been running about 3 years now. Over the last 3 to 5 years, as we've dealt with some perception issues, we've worked very aggressively to get our convention clients to come on the ground here and get a true look at what it looks like on the ground here in Phoenix. This is a program now that enhanced our conversions of groups. Where we typically see our conversions in the 25% range, we find that we're up about 50% once we're able to get them on the ground here. Next one. As we do this, the first point was for the individual groups. We do this on a group stance also for our buyer education trips, where we host groups in here, about 15 to 20 at a time, when we provide a showcase of downtown Phoenix and our resort product over a 3 to 4 day period, where customers are brought in, are able to experience everything from our airport to being on the ground here, all of our facilities and our amenities to hopefully get them to book future conventions. Okay. Major market sales missions. As I said earlier, we have staff based in Chicago and Washington, D.C. We support those efforts by major missions where we bring our convention center counterparts, our hotel counterparts, and some of our other visitor industry partners into these missions. These are week-long missions to really go into these major markets and to tell our customers what's currently going on, any new developments, and any opportunities to meet in the future. In addition to these major markets, we do about 6 other what we call mini market missions into some secondary markets, such as Portland, Seattle, Denver, Northern California, and Texas, to really go on a smaller scale to go ahead and reach and provide a larger umbrella around the country of what we're doing to get conventions to come here for the future. And in addition to all these other efforts, we also employ a very aggressive schedule for promotions. We probably go to about 20 more trade shows a year that really hide some of those individual areas, religious conventions, medical conventions, youth sports. So we run the gamut and we really spread ourselves across all markets. And our team here in Phoenix, Washington, D.C., and Chicago are active all year at various trade shows. Now, in specifics to the convention center and a lot of things that we're doing here locally to get business up and keep our business levels up for future years, what we do is we work in a collaborative form with a lot of our partners who benefit greatly from the conventions coming in here on a daily basis. Our hotels in downtown Phoenix, our convention center partners, and our service partners within the convention center, we all band together to provide these promotional incentive programs for future years. We target these for our need periods. We have a value period that pretty much ranges between Memorial Day and Labor Day when our demand goes down pretty low. And what we do is we work together to construct programs to really reposition ourselves as a real value option to groups. And we're running the second year of our programs now, and we're working collaboratively, working in the next year for our next promotion for more future business. Short-term bookings in the corporate market and group business, we see real value in here for our short-term dates, where we work with Jerry and his team within 2 years on a lot of those holes to fill. These groups are smaller in scale. You see a lot of product rollouts, national sales meetings, and things like that that still drive large numbers and large room pickups in the downtown. Our direct sales efforts in the key markets, one of the most exciting things we're doing now in the life sciences market, these focus all on pharmaceutical, medical meetings, medical devices, where we see a lot of opportunity in here. And we've taken a lot of effort over the last year to really activate a lot of the city assets with the downtown Sheraton Hotel and the Convention Center. And we've seen lots of collaboration with the biomedical campus that we've been able to work with Al Bravo, Judy Burness, and the team over there, where we're actively cross-marketing the convention space at the Convention Center and that available space like the simulation center, telemedicine center on the campus there for use for our convention groups. Most notably, the Society for Critical Care Medicine that met prior to the Super Bowl coming in January, they actually utilized the simulation center to train 40 doctors on a daily basis where they couldn't do that in the classroom. So a lot of programs we're working on in a collaborative fashion with the biomedical campus and some of our other partners in downtown Phoenix. Client testimonials, obviously battling through some of the perception issues and any opportunity that we can take, like Super Bowl, all of these big showcase events that we bring here in downtown Phoenix, they allow us to use that as an entree to other groups to come in here in downtown Phoenix. So when we're out selling this community, selling downtown Phoenix, and selling greater Phoenix in our larger markets in Washington, D.C., and Chicago, these client testimonials go a long way. And we'll have a video here shortly to kind of showcase one of these large events that's come into the downtown that we can utilize with other like groups to promote downtown Phoenix and the Convention Center.
So what you can see from this graphic is probably most notably is some of the effects of the downturn in the economy and how it affected the citywide conventions that we had here at the Convention Center. But what I really want to point out is what you see going forward. So in 2014 was the first year that we started to see a little bit of a recovery from what happened during the Great Recession. 2015, as you can see right now, we have already passed where we were as far as conventions, citywide conventions in the Convention Center last year. This slide that you see here is as of the end of March, and I recently looked at the new numbers for as of the end of April, and you can see that even though we are in the year of 2015, we aren't resting on our laurels for that year, and working with our team, we're still aggressively pursuing those tentatives that you see listed there. So that number is right now at 59. 2016, you can see the number that we are is already, what we have definite is already surpassed where we were in 2013, and we have quite a few number of events in the pipeline going forward that we can convert. What I really want to focus on are these next two slides, because this slide here shows the number of Phoenix Convention Center delegates. Delegates, and the next slide, which shows room nights, those are really the true representatives of what the economic impact is of these events that take place in downtown Phoenix, because these delegates are the ones, as I've said before, that are in downtown, that are visiting the restaurants and the bars, that are staying in our hotels. That's where we're getting the economic impact from these events. And one thing that I really want to point out is if you look at the number of delegates that are assigned to the years prior, we had maybe a higher number of course, if you're looking prior to 2013, we had a higher number of conventions, but the number of delegates that we have going forward are even more than that with a less number of conventions. And what that's telling us is that we are attracting some of the larger events to come into downtown. Not only that, but we're at a point now where these conventions that are coming into downtown Phoenix, their delegates are more excited about coming to this destination, because in the past, maybe they would have been a little apprehensive about traveling, but now they are more excited about coming to this destination. And another thing that we worked with Visit Phoenix is really getting the message out as to what the downtown experience is, and then also expanding upon that and discussing what the experience of Arizona is. And what that means is some of these delegates are bringing their families, so they're staying a little bit longer. Those are the shoulder dates that we like to refer to. And this also reiterates what I was saying before. Reflects the number of hotel room nights. So people are staying here, they're staying longer. And if you look at the pipeline, so the numbers that you see in green to the right of the graph, James mentioned what the conversion rate was in the past. And now it's at 50% when we were able to utilize some of the programs that he was referring to before. We're working very hard to even push that, because the more that we can get people exposed to as far as what their experience will be like when they come to downtown Phoenix, the more likely these tentatives are to convert into definites.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Jerry, if you go back that slide, I was asking John a question very specifically. So the NFL related events that were in our facilities earlier this year are reflected in the numbers for 2015. And so what I think is astonishing about this chart is we all know the activity that came through, including the NFL experience and all of those sorts of things. The next year is projected currently to be greater. And so I think I think the big message here is the velocity of activity that is starting to come because of the efforts of the entire community, the hospitality community, the CVB, and the convention center staff is actually starting to gain momentum. And so that we could truly, well, we never rest on our laurels, can truly say we're starting to see the hospitality industry really start to turn back our way, where we have been lagging somewhat our peer markets. So it's very, very encouraging.
So this is just to show you some of the clients that we've had in the building recently. I know James was talking about some of the events that we have coming in. John had mentioned that we had Dish Network that was here not too long ago, bringing 5,000 people. We've got the Tool fasteners that are coming in. That's another 5,000 people. Auto Trader, that's 2,500 people. We've got the National Association for Gifted Children, APWA. Phoenix Comic-Con, as John mentioned, is actually going to be moving in next week. Matter of fact, their pre-convention meeting is today, shortly after this subcommittee, and that's why I'm wearing my Spider-Man cufflinks. The international, now I do want to talk about the International Microwave Symposium, and that's the group that you see listed at the top, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. There's a lot of brain power that's in the convention center right now. I mean, so much so that I read an article this morning that Steve had shared with us. This group they're going to be holding a drag race with vehicles, and these cars are being controlled by people's minds, by their brain waves. I like to mention that because this is exactly the type of group that we like to attract to downtown Phoenix and to the destination. When we get to think that Phoenix can be a part of something that's so innovative, and that the next great thing could probably be something that is discussed right here in our building as we speak, and to see that we can be a part of the seed of something that could grow into something spectacular, whether it's the next innovative idea or whether it's the thought of someone attending this convention bringing their business to Phoenix in the future or expanding their business into Phoenix. It's something that's very exciting for us, and it's also something that really drives and motivates both my team and James's team. We also talked about the college football playoff. That's the next big thing that's coming. One of the victories that I like to refer to when it comes to this event is during the press conference that was just a few weeks ago, they announced that ESPN will be setting up shop in downtown Phoenix. Now, that's a victory for us because, as you may recall, during Super Bowl, ESPN was the first station to commit to a space that was unfortunately outside of Phoenix. So during Super Bowl, that they realized and noticed the excitement of the activity, everything that was going on in downtown Phoenix, and this time they did not want to be a part of it, so they jumped at the opportunity to set up shop in downtown Phoenix. The convention center will be buzzing again during the college football playoff. They'll have a fan experience similar to the NFL experience that will be in our building. They will activate downtown. They'll be utilizing Block 23 in a similar way that the NFL was using it during the Super Bowl. There's a Taste of the Championship event that will be downtown. A lot of activity and a lot of excitement around the national championship football game. James mentioned a video that we'd like to show you, and we'd like to show that to you now. And this is really one of the best ways that we can have a testimonial to the experience and the success of an event once it occurs here in downtown Phoenix. This was a group that celebrates women in computing, and we had a large number of major computer groups that were here and that were attracting business, that were presenting about their next advances, and Phoenix was the home for this event, and they were so proud of their experience that they took it upon themselves to make a video and share with their attendees. So since the audio isn't working, rather than James and I singing the music that you would be hearing, I think what James and I would like to do is talk a little bit about what this event was.
This was Anita Borg, the Grace Hopper celebration, celebrating women in technology. In 2012, when we first booked this group for 2014, there were 6,000 delegates. By the time they reached us, there were 8,000 delegates, and we're currently rebidding on hosting them again in 2018, and their numbers are projected to go all the way up to 15,000 delegates. So great growth, and this was one of those programs that created compression all the way throughout the city. They utilized rooms in downtown Phoenix, all along the light rail core, and the airport, because it just kept growing out of control, and to the point where they had to cap it at 8,000 attendees.
And I can tell you that the staff at the convention center, they really enjoy and get a kick out of seeing this type of representation of our building, especially when it's a group that came here and had a successful event. I know that we were talking about Super Bowl before. That was another opportunity for us to see some of our venues the same way that the rest of the world was seeing them on TV. So this is it gives a very similar feeling, a lot of pride, and it's exciting to know that this type of event is something that was so successful in Phoenix that they would very much like to consider us to come back here again in the future.
So with that, Steve's going to wrap it up and talk a little bit about some of the other services and activities that Visit Phoenix is engaged in.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and City Council members of the subcommittee. We appreciate your partnership. And what I'd like to start by saying is it takes more than just a village to get this done. It takes a great city. And we appreciate the partnership, not only with city staff, from management to John and his team at the convention center, but many of you have gone with us, knocking on doors and recruiting new business here. And I hope I can count on you to assist us in the future, because we're going to need your help. The reason is because we're getting some, as you see, some lift here. But we cannot rest on anything, because we need to continue to push harder and get more business to say yes when you're on a roll. That's the time to make more business happen. So while we're thrilled that the headwinds have subsided a bit, and we're seeing that, as we say in the business, the trees are getting a little smaller, we still do not have the lift where we need to be. Where our trajectory is going is to greater heights than we've ever seen before, and we look forward to doing it together. And by the way, I just want to say who Grace Hopper was. She was the first admiral in the Navy, and she served in World War II, and her major was in technology and intelligence, and she was a great leader in that era. And today, with technology industry in the Silicon Valley, there's a dearth of diversity in the workforce. And so Google and Oracle and many other companies took it upon themselves to be here to recruit people. They were here at the Grace Hopper Convention, the Anita Borg Institute. So it was a phenomenal way to see other industries not registered here, but on site and recruiting. And that's just what it's all about. This past week, the nation celebrated National Tourism Week, and I hope we were all a little too busy to stop and celebrate it because we've been very busy. But I want to take the opportunity to share what the visitor impact means to this community, because we are a great city and we have great people. But we also need to know that this is about jobs. This is about our residents and delivering services to them and being able to do it in a cost-effective manner. And I know that the tourism is the #1 business in Arizona. And I think we need to stop and realize that really without visitors, our government economies and our budgets are simply not sustainable. Visitors themselves keep us from paying about an extra $1,000 a year in taxes that they deliver. These convention delegates and these visitors that come into the city, they don't require as much of the city services, certainly streets and certainly services and water and garbage, but hopefully not the jails. We know they don't use the schools, but this helps us get to a better yield from a visitor dollar, if you will, and to get services done back to the citizens. To us, that's really what it's all about, is the investment. At the end of the day, it is about what they spend and what they bring into this community. But keep in mind that the visitor industry really is the front door for economic development, because you come for the visit and you return for the opportunity. Many of you here in this room came here as a visitor, whether it was for school, for short term, came here on a visit perhaps, and chose to stay. Several of you we celebrate as generations born here, which we celebrate. But I think you understand and you know that even when you host visitors into your own home, the first place you probably go to is the grocery store. And I wonder if the grocery stores realize they're in the visitor business. But let's talk about beyond the downtown, because it's very important that we bring the conventions and be successful in our investments. But it's also important that we celebrate the ability to bring visitors here who choose to come and spend their discretionary income. We're going to see about an 8% increase this summer in travel, mostly for the boomers and the older generation. They have a little more time. They're going to be up a little bit. Our Xers and Gen Xers are still working a little harder this summer to do so. But we're seeing the transient leisure trend come up too. And that's important because those are people who are choosing to come here on their own dime. And it's important that we get them out and around the community to see the beautiful mountains, parks, museum, festivals, arts, all the things that lie in our different 8 districts. The 180,000 acres of mountain park spaces that we have in this area, 16,000 acres alone, South Mountain. There's some great opportunities to get people, we believe, to come earlier, bring more people with them, stay later. That's really the goals that we ought to be looking at, sidebar, along with capturing the momentum that we see moving forward. Just to share with you some points real quickly, I want to hand this out to you real quick, and I have copies for those that are available. This is just to share that we had about 4 million website visits during this last term of our contract, or social media, if you will. 22 million people on the website alone, page views rather, 300 million online paid media impressions, plus millions of impressions in outdoor and print media. So I think it's important we know that there's also a branding task at hand. And the visitphoenix.com website itself, generating visits and people converting, the study was conducted by Destination Analytics and showed that about 25 million a year is also generated in direct spending from leisure visitors who convert through the eyes of our portal. We host a lot of media. We've hosted about 1,800 media in the last term of this contract, leads to go to our members, our investors in this community, to keep business going throughout Phoenix. We also support, obviously, the city and its missions to Mexico and work in partnership with them. And finally, just to chat about one last thing, is working with travel agents from around the world. Canada, Mexico, some of our international markets and domestic. Canadians have an annual picnic at South Mountain. They go and celebrate our heritage and what they do. And I think the Canadians were one of our best friends during the Great Recession when they came down, made things nicer on us. Anyway, at the end of the day, we work together, political conventions, RNC, DNC, you see what we have to do? We have to get elected about 3 times a week. And sometimes we don't, but we keep going after it. And that's what we do together. And I want to thank you for your partnership. I want to thank you for all the things your city staff does, you do, in keeping our brand going and keeping it elevated. And our work is just really beginning. As we get back to where we were in 08 and 09, as good as it looks, we're just back to where we were in 08 and 09. So we need a long way to go. And so we want to get to work. We want to be able to do so aggressively. We still have government-restricted travel. The sequester remains a headwind for us. So bringing them here to see the value of Phoenix, particularly in the summer, May through October, is really a key strategy for us. So we need to work harder, smarter. We all know that we don't have the budgets that some of the competitors have, and that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss our energy, our passion, and how we can work harder and smarter together. So again, we thank you. I want to just also let you see real quickly, these are the stats that go with what we discussed on the website. This is just a peek inside what's going on today at this trade show. If you'll just turn the pages for this microwave convention, 9,000 to 10,000 people in the knowledge industry are taking a business trade show face-to-face today in the building down the street. This is the trade show floor. It includes Texas Instruments. There's different organizations that are here selling. There are 904 booths exhibiting, and 80 different international exhibitors from Korea, China, Germany, and the United Kingdom are here to do business in our city and downtown. This is the front door to economic development. The last slide shows you, thank you very much. See you in San Francisco. Grace Hopper is going to see you in Houston. Our job is to see you back here. And that's what we look forward to do. And thank you for your partnership.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, that's staff's presentation. We're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. We have one card marked in favor, David Roderick. Okay, I'll open it up to my colleagues, Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I always appreciate what you do. I think that you have made remarkable progress regaining a market that was not your fault that you lost, I guess is the politically correct way to say that. But I have known and that you have come out, you've talked to my groups in my district, convinced them how important job you have, what you bring to this economy, to the jobs you bring. And I think you are doing an outstanding job. I really appreciate all the extra efforts you're putting into it. You are high-techy now, and I appreciate it. So I will support moving this forward.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
A motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Councilwoman Diego?
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this presentation. I, about a decade ago, worked at the Arizona Office of Tourism trying to promote Arizona, and I'm well aware that we do not do as much as many of our competitor markets to bring in that business. And even though other markets had snow this month, we still have to remind people of our advantages here, so appreciate your hard work on that. I also, I think, appreciate your discussion about beyond the convention center, because I do think that is enormously important. We had a great presentation from Duke Ryder at the Downtown Phoenix Partnership about signature events and how that really has helped Austin with South by Southwest and other markets. Mm-hmm. And so just that is something I would love to see as a continued priority, because I think that is something that at least I know many people who've moved to Austin because of that first experience, and we've had some great events that are doing that for us and need to continue to invest in that area. And it looks like we have a big one coming up. Hopefully we can do as much as we can on the football championship to have the economic development impact and show off our wonderful city and really bring in business leaders who are interested in football but will then want to stay when they see our.
There certainly is a plan for the CEO component, council member, and look forward to working with you all again. I know you and your husband were very important to Congressman in that this last time around. By the way, sorry, James, I want to correct you. We were the only city. It's actually a quadfecta because of Pro Bowl, and the college football playoff is a decisive football playoff. So there was a bit of an argument back in 2-2 when they played at New Orleans. So we did reach that pinnacle. But I agree with you, council member. We need to remain flexible to opportunities and be able to do everything we can to move the needle faster and longer. And I do concur that these events, that people do come and make business when they come and see it.
Wonderful. And then I appreciate your comments also on diversity and helping us with the tech workforce and also bringing in conventions that look like our country. And then we as a council unanimously passed an equal pay policy, asking our business partners like yourself to make that a priority among the many federal laws out there, but equal pay for men and women. And I know that is a commitment you share with us, but wanted to mention that.
Okay. Good. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of moving ourselves along, Ms. Mackey and her team are coming forward. And Chris has always committed to me that if we need her to do something in 5 minutes, she and her team can get that done. And so we have a great development proposal for you in the northern part of our downtown. And Chris and her team are going to share with you the results of an RFP and staff's recommendation.
Great.
Not only do I want to get done quickly with you, but if Texas Instruments is over in the convention center, I'd like to know what I'm doing sitting here. So, thanks for having us again. We are here to talk to you about the results of the RFP for 206 East Portland. As you'll remember, you authorized the RFP to be issued in October of 2014. It was issued in November of 2014 and closed January 30th of 2015. We convened a panel of 6. 2 proposals were received, and we are here today to talk to you about their recommendation. With that, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Anna Darian.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'll try to make it quick. 5 minutes is plenty of time, hopefully. So let's move to the next. Okay, so as she mentioned, this is the 206 East Portland site. It's a pretty small site. It's only about 0.2 acres. It's at the northeast corner of 2nd Street in Portland, but despite its size, it's a key location that we really feel has a lot of potential. It's about 1 block north of Roosevelt, 2 blocks east of the light rail, and just 1 block south of Hance Park. So definitely could be a catalyst for a lot of development in that area that we're looking for. So as she mentioned, I won't repeat that, but we had an evaluation panel in March. As with any panel that we have, we've got a mix of community members and city staff. So we had representation from Evans Churchill, Roosevelt Action, Roosevelt Merchants Association, and Hance Park Conservancy and Downtown Phoenix Inc. as always. So the developer that was selected is Stark James. They are present here if there's any technical questions. This is Brian Stark and Wes James that form Stark James here. They're also working with a financial partner of MJM Holdings. Up here you've got some sampling of some of the projects they've worked on. The most famous one, I'll just skip to that one, is the Containers on Grand project. This is 12th Avenue and Grand. I've gotten a lot of press, looking like it's going to open in summer, which is the first shipping container multifamily residential project over here in Western States. So we're excited to have another such project here in downtown. So what they're proposing is what you've got up here. From a residential side, it looks quite similar to the Grand Avenue project. We've got 9 market rate residential units. We've got 2 artist live work spaces with galleries at the base and 1 retail space that's now set to be a coffee shop. All of the units are 848 square feet, with the apartments going for $1.55 a square foot. One of the concerns that the community had was with regard to parking, and so all of the parking will be covered on site. We've got 9 spots, and the commercial use will be on street, which is allowed within the downtown code. Some of the elements of the project that the panel really liked was that it's modern, it's innovative, it connected with the Roosevelt Row artist community. It's walkable, it's transit-oriented. For visual purposes, the trees were removed, but there is a tree landscape that is going to be surrounding this property, so it's going to add to that tree and shade master plan. I think I've covered most of it. So basically, the land was appraised at $215,000. That's what we proposed. That's what they accepted. There's not going to be any city financial assistance, so no chiplet or such tools. Basically, the timeline we're looking at is to enter into a development agreement within 6 months of council approval. So that would be when we go to formal. Then start construction within 12 months, and then finish construction within 12 months of that date. So basically, a 24-month total. And so lots of benefits to the city, basically disposing of 1 more property. We've got some jobs coming online with this, new sales tax, and an activation of a long vacant property. So with that, our recommendation is to get your approval to move forward to council for formal approval to enter into the development agreement. And so if you have any questions, we're here. And Brian Stark is in the house as well.
Any, jeez.
And she said 5 minutes. We held to 5 minutes.
I do have,
Don't think I breathed through that, but it's not.
nicely done. I do have 2 cards, Brian McHugh, excuse me, and Kathleen Santon. Both marked in favor. Thank you very much for being here. Any questions or comments by my colleagues in the council? Good? Yes, Councilwoman Williams?
I always have to say something, I guess. I love that stacking. I think that is so cool. I have seen it before in other cities, and I'm anxious. I think it's appropriate for the property. I think it'll add to the district, and so I move approval of this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I think it's an exciting mixed-use project for downtown. I want to thank you both for working through this, and congratulations to Stark James on a great proposal. Just another very exciting project for downtown Phoenix and for the city of Phoenix. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Finally, we have item 9, the Deer Valley Airport Master Plan update.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Ms. Fisher and her team are completely up to the challenge. If 0.2 acres could be done in 5 minutes, I gave them 1 more minute to do 1,000 acres.
I'm so okay. I do apologize to Mr. Stark, who's marked in favor. Obviously, we're good to go.
Take the win.
All right, thank you.
And so, as a requirement of the Federal Aviation Administration, the Aviation Department, as owner of the Deer Valley Airport, is required to undergo a reevaluation of its master plan for that airport on a periodic basis. Staff is here to tell you about the work they've been conducting, both with the users of the airport in the community, and what the preliminary results are, and recommending your approval of their recommendation.
Before we get started, I just want his comments don't count against our time, right? Okay. So I will just start briefly by introducing the team and letting them get started. To my right is Planning and Development Deputy Director for the airport, Judy Ross. And then Jessica Wyatt, who is an Associate Vice President with HNTB. They were the consultant that conducted the master plan. And on the end is Mr. Ed Farron, who is the airport manager of the nation's busiest general aviation airport.
And if I could add one other person, I'd like to recognize Randy Payne, who is the actual project manager on the master plan. And Randy, can you wave? Thank you very much. Okay, first, just to give you an overview of the master plan. The master plan is a comprehensive study for the airport. It usually describes the development in a short term, 5 years, a medium term, 10 years, and a long term, 15 to 20-year period to meet the future demand. And it's usually updated every 5 to 10 years, or if you've had a significant impact over from the last master plan period, which we did have the Great Recession that did affect our forecast. And the ultimate goal is to provide a framework to guide the future development of the airport in a cost-effective way that meets the aviation forecast. And by the aviation forecast at Deer Valley, we mean based aircraft and aircraft operations. I do like to point out the Federal Aviation Administration reviews 2 components of the master plan. One is the aviation forecast that was approved in September 2014, which really guides the rest of the development because it tells you how many based aircraft and approximately how many operations are projected. And then the airport layout plan. And the airport layout plan is really a schematic drawing of the different improvements over a period of time. And the airport layout plan is important because the FAA needs to approve this airport layout plan so those improvements can be eligible for federal funding. And we have 4 primary goals during the master plan process. One is to outreach to our stakeholders, tenants, pilots, the community, and interested parties. And Mr. Farron will go into a little bit more of how we conducted outreach throughout the study. The second was to identify the facilities that were required to meet the different time periods. And each master plan is specifically tailored to meet the needs of each individual airport and its communities. And master plans are to support the modernization and expansion of existing airports and represents the airport strategy for development. And that strategy needs to be done in a fiscally responsible way. The third bullet talks about safety, and it's probably the most important bullet that we have up there. So the master plan does look to incorporate any safety improvements that can take place because we want to have the safest airport possible. And the third bullet is, our fourth bullet is we want to make sure the master plan demonstrates that we're developing an environmentally responsible way and incorporates sustainability principles, either through construction, operations, or maintenance. But we do want to make sure that we do incorporate sustainability in areas that it does make sense. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ed to talk a little bit about the outreach and changes that have been taking place.
Thank you, Judy. Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee. The last airport master plan that was conducted at Deer Valley Airport was in 2007, and we've made a number of improvements to the airport since 2007, and in an effort to save time, I'll just maybe touch on a couple of my favorites. One that we wrapped up last year was the relocation of our northernmost taxiway, which is Taxiway Alpha. We've also just very recently added a couple of new taxiway connectors, and those are the connectors that connect the northernmost runway to the northernmost taxiway. Through this master plan that we just have worked our way through, some of the considerations that we had to take a real good look at were changes in the forecast. As Judy sort of alluded to earlier, the last master plan was done in 2007. The economy was fantastic. Things looked bright. And the aviation forecasts that were developed in that master plan were fairly optimistic, but they were reasonable for the economic climate of the time. Of course, then 2008 happened, the economy took a dip, and those forecasts really never materialized. So we developed a whole new set of forecasts, which we'll talk a little bit more about here shortly. Some other considerations that we had to take into account were new FAA design standards. They are not set in stone. They are oftentimes a moving target. So we had to find the current standards and try to identify ways of meeting them. And then certain other environmental and regulatory constraints that we were faced with. We recognized early on in this master planning process that in order to get a very high quality product at the end, that we would have to put a great deal of focus on stakeholder involvement and public outreach. So to that end, we established a couple of subcommittees or committees to help us kind of work through these. I won't go through each and every one of these partners that teamed up with us, but on the technical advisory side, that was a committee that was made up of folks that have a great deal of technical expertise in the aviation industry. Just some of them would be our fixed base operators, our flight schools. We've got a very prominent pilots association that's based at Deer Valley. They were critical to our success in this whole process. So this is the group that really developed a lot of the concepts and ideas that are contained within the master plan process. And we also worked with a public advisory committee. Now, these are folks that don't necessarily have that same level of technical expertise that the technical advisory committee does, but they're still folks that have a vested interest in Deer Valley Airport. Just a couple of examples: village planners, the CED, community and economic development folks, city council representatives, et cetera. So this group really helped us to identify potential issues that we were working through. Possible unintended consequences, and really just to get some feedback on the direction that we were heading with the master plan. Also key to the success of this process was a series of public outreach meetings that we conducted. These were open to the general public, very well attended. They were advertised in the online and in local publications. And this really provided the general public an opportunity to come and take a look at our progress, provide us with feedback. And we did actually make several changes to the master plan based on the feedback that we received from the public. Some of the requirements that we identified in the master plan process were we wanted to mitigate FAA designated hotspots. Those are areas around the airport where I don't want to say a collision might be likely, but might be more prone to occur than on other locations at the airport. We needed to take a very good look at those and try to find ways to mitigate them. And we needed to take a look at capacity improvements, whether that was through the addition of taxiway connectors or being relocated or brand new ones or what have you. And we also took a look at runway extensions throughout the process. And lastly, we wanted to get a real good feeling for what, we wanted to hear what our base pilots and tenants had to say. So early on in the process, we surveyed them. We sent out surveys to all of roughly 1,100 of our tenants. We got about 148 responses back, which was a fairly good turnout, I think. And we just wanted to make sure that we were meeting their needs, and we wanted to hear them. So some of the things that we heard from them are up on the screen there: avionics repair shops, an additional flight planning center on the north side of the field. We've got one on the south side, but we don't have one on the north side, even though we've got a tremendous number of hangars up there. A compass rose, which is merely a painting on the ground that helps a pilot calibrate his or her compass in the aircraft. Propeller repair shop and aircraft paint shop. So that's some of the things that the based pilots and tenants at the field would like to see. So with that, I will turn it over to Jessica Wyatt from HNTV.
Okay, so in addition to that information that we collected from the tenants, we did the aviation forecast that Judy alluded to, and Ed talked about. So quickly here, the dashed line is the existing, what's happened since that last master plan was completed. The red line at the top shows that sort of aggressive forecast. This is based aircraft, so we have two components to it: based aircraft and operations, and this is the number of aircraft sitting at the airport. The orange is our forecast. As you can see, it's not as aggressive as that red line in the old forecast was, because it takes into account that dip from the recession. And we're projecting we're going to go from about 1,000, a little over 1,000 planes at the airport to just under 1,800. So the second half of that forecast is the operations. Again, same colors. The red at the top is the old forecast from 2007. Orange is ours. And so we're projecting that by the end of the 20-year planning horizon, we'll get to about 600 operations, planes taking off and landing, from the 360 that we're at today. And that's about 10 years later than the previous forecast had projected. So based on that and the information from those surveys and different groups, we came up with the recommended plan. This is the land use plan that shows the ultimate development. The purple is new pavement, mostly airfield pavement, and those changes. And then a big part of that was trying to move and accelerate things to the other side of, move things to the other side of the airport to balance demand. So we divided those into 4 phases over the 20-year horizon, about 5 years each. Projects could happen sooner or later as demand warrants. So this is the first phase happening in the next 4 years or so. The main improvements coming out of it are safety related, moving the hold bays where aircraft wait at the end of the runways. That's a safety improvement, and adding a second parallel taxiway on the south, again, another safety and operational improvement. The second phase that we're looking at moves some development and third-party development up to the north side of the airport, starting to balance demand and use between the runways, and moves taxiway Bravo, which is that one between the airport. The runway is similar to the Project Alpha that was just done to meet safety separation standards. The third phase does some more taxiway cleanup, those safety standards that we talked about, moves a flight school and some other general aviation and third-party development to the north. And the final phase actually includes a runway extension, 800 feet, that would provide more capability on the north side of the airport. And just to point out, by the time we get to that phase, you'll have done another iteration of this to sort of, confirm that that's the right, that still makes sense with things. And that.
Okay, just in closing, we have done significant outreach to interested parties, including 4 public meetings and workshops, and all meetings were well attended, and we received some great suggestions during those meetings. We've also had significant support from the pilot community, and I do want to point out that even during the workshops, the pilots were not only providing suggestions on the development, but they were very appreciative of all the improvements that have been taking place at Deer Valley to date. So I think that's important because we don't hear that very much, but they were very appreciative of those improvements. And I also think that it's very important that we thank and express our appreciation to all those who spent much time reviewing voluminous technical documents, taking time to attend the meetings, and contributing their suggestions to make Deer Valley the best airport possible for the community. And I would like to note that the Deer Valley Village Planning Committee has reviewed the master plan and they recommend approval. And we also have, the master plan has been reviewed by the Phoenix Aviation Advisory Board. So at this time, we would like to ask for your recommendation to the City Council for approval of Deer Valley Master Plan.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We do have a question, Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation and your hard work on this. You said that you talked to pilots. I just wanted to make sure you ran this by Skip Rims, right? Because if you didn't, I cannot support this today. No. Just a question. We didn't touch on it at all here, but clearly not within this time horizon. But is there a thought that maybe 50 years, is there ever a time when commercial flights might come out of Deer Valley? As you know, as I'm just thinking about, as we're, bless you, as we have people in here today, which, by the way, is very concerning. I've never heard people start talking about that we need to limit Sky Harbor and our growth. But I, shudder to say that that may be part of our future. And so we need to start thinking about these things. Obviously, Councilwoman Williams has been a leader with respect to Williams Gateway as a reliever, but is this could Deer Valley even possibly be a reliever at some point in the future for commercial aircraft?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Gates, what we see in the forecast, that's not a possibility. And also there's geography around the airport that really limits how those runways can be used. So we anticipate it would always be a general aviation airport.
Okay, and it's great as it is. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we may be looking at other possibilities in the future. But then there was that business park on there. I think it was the last slide. And it was 2029, 2033. My only thought is, these airports are fantastic economic development drivers. Why so far out? Why wouldn't that be sooner in time?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Gates, this is really based on demand, and we do have quite a bit of real estate on the south side of the airport that is still available for development. It has infrastructure. There's some raw land. We also think there may be some opportunity for real estate on the north side to actually be developed for non-aviation because of the long-term horizon that it would be needed for aviation purposes. So we have plenty of real estate to accomplish all of your economic development dreams at Deer Valley, and we are prepared to allocate more real estate when that real estate's been absorbed.
Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Could you speak to any conversations or input from residents about community noise impact, including at the Deer Valley Village Planning Commission? Any concerns that they'd like us to consider?
Well, I'll let the team answer that question in more detail, but we do have residents who attend some of the meetings who do have noise concerns. This is the busiest general aviation airport in the country and has been for quite some time. And so we do respond to citizen concerns associated with Deer Valley, just like we do at Sky Harbor, and assist with those same concerns with Scottsdale Airport. Anything you want to?
That's very thorough. Fortunately, at Deer Valley Airport, we don't have the volume of complaints that they do have down at Sky Harbor. We've got a couple of primary complainants. We've reached out to them and tried to get a better understanding of exactly the impacts that they're experiencing at their homes, and trying to identify ways that we might be able to mitigate that to the extent that we can through airport operations throughout the field.
And I know I read it somewhere. What was the vote at the Village Planning Commission? Was it?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Gaga, they unanimously recommended approval.
So thank you. I think that is a meaningful, and that we need to be very careful about this. And as we're accomplishing Councilman Gates's economic development dreams, could we also speak of hangar space and the possibility of additional space for hangars at Deer Valley?
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so we have areas designated on the north side for that expansion as it's needed. There's a waiting list currently for certain size hangars.
So it's needed today?
It is, but there's cost benefit.
For the smaller hangars. And so we do have a wait list for the smaller hangars, but on the south side, from an economic development standpoint, there's about 40 acres on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. 20 acres is complete with infrastructure to support large hangar development for corporate aircraft users. And then there's another 20 acres that is does not have infrastructure. Before the recession, we did have proposals, and we're working on long-term ground leases with several users who did not follow through on those agreements as a result of the recession. And then on the upper left-hand side of your screen, there's also real estate there for more aviation-type users. So whether it's the small hangars, corporate hangars, or service providers to aviation users, there's a real estate that is designated for that and ready to go.
Thank you.
And I might add, before, this is just a recommended time frame based on what we see in the forecast for demand. We also have a business plan based on market demand for different types of development at Deer Valley. We consistently combine those two things and update those two things, and we can certainly, if the forecast turns out differently or real estate market conditions change, we can adjust this as it is approved and adopted by the FAA, but we would periodically be doing updates to make it more current.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not? Councilman?
I have reviewed this and I've worked with the staff for a long time, and Ed has done an excellent job resolving noise complaints in District 1, at least I know. I am still hoping that someday I will see a fire station that can go either on the field or out to the street. I think that that's a missing component here, and as this airport grows, that needs to be incorporated into the plan. So, having said that, I would accept this plan and move it forward for approval.
Second.
I do appreciate the comment.
You've got the right audience for that comment.
Yeah. So if motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, next item on the agenda is, we're back to public comment. We have no further, we do have one card. Okay. Okay, Ms. Ginger Maddox. Please, thank you.
Subcommittee members, I'm sorry to make you sick of hearing me talk today, but I hope what I have to offer can be a contribution. I live directly under the flight path at 16th Avenue and Linwood. I'm right next door to the Coliseum. For some reason, I live in a little bunker, and I don't hear what other people hear. But my heart goes out to these people who I know are suffering. Now, the last hat that I wore before I retired, I was a commercial and residential energy auditor. So I do understand how to eliminate heat, cool, vibration, so on and so forth. I think we should, and this is just food for thought, I would like to see the city consider another layer to what we are trying to accomplish. Everyone wants to see the flight path go back to the way it was, and that would be a good thing. But in the meantime, you've heard a lot of conversation from people who've been at this microphone of what they're trying to do on their own. We've got a lot of expert techniques that are available that people can use to help themselves. And I would like to see a community committee formed of these experts who could come together with a second tier of solutions until we get what we want. God forbid that we don't get what we want. And my first love is historic preservation. I just happened to fall into this FAA thing because it's combined together now. One of the things that we want to see preserved is the Tier 1 windows along our streets in these historic areas. So we have a different challenge than what some of these other homes have. There is a product on the market that's patented. It's fairly expensive, but it's very easy to install, and it does create a dead air space. I looked into this when I was getting ready to retire to learn what the qualities were, and at that time we were looking at reducing heat. But this product would really help to create a dead air space that helps to reduce the noise level. There are white noise machines. There is landscaping techniques. My home just happens to be built that way, and I think that if we formed a committee of experts, we could give these folks ideas that are over and above what the people at the city are trying to do. It becomes a little bit of a political issue, but nonetheless, if we get what we want from the FAA, we've just simply improved these homes so that they're greener and we haven't destroyed their historic value. So food for thought.
Thank you.
And I have one last thing I like to say to the FAA. We were not broke until you decided to fix us.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox. Okay, next agenda item is future agenda items. Everyone has a list in front of them. Is there anything that we should be discussing or adding?
Could we have an update on the Discovery Triangle? Probably not till fall, annoying, but I'd like to see how they're progressing. And I think she has an excellent idea. I don't know if it would go through aviation or not, but I would hope that we could put a committee together that could do exactly what you said, because I think we need to find some alternatives, because I don't hear any quick solutions coming this way. And we've got to help these people.
Great suggestions. Good. All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.